in which our lovers begin to learn the consequences of their actions. Chapter 8. At the end of May, when everything was already more or less settled, she received her husband's reply to her complaints about country inconveniences. He wrote to her asking forgiveness for not having thought of everything, and promised to come at the first opportunity. The opportunity did not present itself, and until the beginning of June, Darya Alexandrovna lived alone in the country. On Sunday during St. Peter's, Darya Alexandrovna went to the liturgy and had all her children take communion. In her intimate, philosophical conversations with her sister, mother, and friends, she very often surprised them with her free thinking in regard to religion. She had her own strange religion of metempsychosis, in which she firmly believed, caring little for the dogmas of the Church. But in the family she strictly fulfilled all the requirements of the Church, not only to set an example, but with all her heart, and the fact that the children had not received communion for more than a year troubled her greatly. And so, with Matryona Filimonovna's full approval and sympathy, she decided to do it now, in the summer. Darya Alexandrovna thought about how to dress the children several days ahead of time. Dresses were made, altered, and washed. Seams and ruffles were let out. Buttons were sewn on, and ribbons prepared. Only Tanya's dress, which the governess had undertaken to make, considerably soured Darya Alexandrovna's disposition. The governess, as she made the alterations, had taken tucks in the wrong places, cut the armholes too big, and all but ruined the dress. Tanya's shoulders were so tight it was painful to see. Matryona Filimonovna's thought of putting in gussets and making a little pelerine. That improved things, but there was nearly a quarrel with the governess. In the morning, however, everything was settled, and by 9 o'clock the priest had been asked to wait till then with liturgy. The dressed-up children, radiant with joy, stood before the carriage at the porch, waiting for their mother. In place of the restive raven, through Matryona Filimonovna's patronage, the stewardess Brownie was harnessed to the carriage, and Darya Alexandrovna, delayed by the cares of her toilet, came out in a white muslin dress to get in. Darya Alexandrovna had done her hair and dressed with care and excitement. Once she used to dress for herself, to be beautiful and admired. Then, the older she became, the more unpleasant it was for her to dress. She saw that she had lost her good looks. But now she again dressed with pleasure and excitement. Now she dressed not for herself, not for her own beauty, but so that, being the mother of these lovely things, she would not spoil the general impression. And taking a last look in the mirror, she remained satisfied with herself. She was pretty. Not as pretty as she had once wanted to be at a ball, but pretty enough for the purpose she now had in mind. There was no one in the church except some muzhiks, the caretakers and their women, but Darya Alexandrovna saw, or it seemed to her that she saw, the admiration aroused by her children and herself. The children were not only beautiful in their fine clothes, but were also sweet in behaving so well. True, Alyosha did not want to stand quite properly. He kept turning and wanted to see his jacket from behind. But all the same, he was remarkably sweet. Tanya stood like a big girl and looked after the little ones. But the smallest, Lily, was lovely with her naive surprise at everything, and it was hard not to smile when, after taking communion, she said in English, "Please, some more?" Returning home, the children felt that something solemn had taken place, and were very quiet. Everything went well at home, too, but at lunch Grisha started whistling, and, what was worst of all, did not obey the governess and had to go without cake. Darya Alexandrovna, had she been there, would not have let it go as far as punishment on such a day, but she had to uphold the governess' orders, and she confirmed her decision that Grisha would not have any cake. Grisha wept, saying that Nikolenka had also whistled, but was not being punished, and that he was weeping not because of the cake. It made no difference to him, but because he had been unfairly dealt with. This was much too sad, and Darya Alexandrovna decided to talk with the governess and get her to forgive him. But passing through the drawing-room, she saw a scene that filled her heart with such joy that tears came to her eyes, and she herself forgave the culprit. The punished boy was sitting at the corner window in the drawing-room. Next to him stood Tanya with a plate. Under the pretext of wishing to feed her dolls, she had asked the governess permission to take her portion of cake to the nursery, and had brought it to her brother instead. Continuing to weep about the unfairness of the punishment he was suffering, he ate the cake she had brought, saying between sobs, "You eat it too. We'll eat it together. Together." Tanya was affected first by pity for Grisha, then by the consciousness of her virtuous deed, and there were tears in her eyes too, but she did not refuse and was eating her share. Seeing their mother, they were frightened, but peering into her face, they understood that they were doing a good thing, laughed, and their mouths full of cake began wiping their smiling lips with their hands, smearing tears and jam all over their beaming faces. "Goodness, your new white dress, Tanya, Grisha," the mother said, trying to save the dress, but with tears in her eyes, smiling a blissful, rapturous smile. The new clothes were taken off. The girls were told to put on blouses and the boys old jackets, and the order was given to harness up the brake again. To the steward's chagrin, with Brownie as the shaft horse, to go gathering mushrooms and then to the bathing house. A sound of rapturous squealing arose in the nursery, and never stopped till they left for the bathing house. They gathered a whole basket of mushrooms. Even Lily found a birch lettuce. Before it used to be Miss Hull who would find one and show her, but now she herself found a big, squishy lettuce, and there was a general cry of delight. "Lily found a squishy one." Then they drove to the river, left the horses under the birches, and went to the bathing house. The coachman, Taranty, having tethered the horses to a tree, where they stood swishing away gadflies, lay down in the shade of the birches, flattening out the grass, and smoked tobacco, while from the bathing house there came to him the ceaseless merry squealing of the children. Though it was a chore to look after all the children and stop their pranks, though it was hard to remember and not mix up all those stockings, drawers, shoes from different feet, and to untie, unbutton, and retie so many tapes and buttons, and Darya Alexandrovna, who had always loved bathing herself and considered it good for the children, enjoyed nothing so much as this bathing with them all. To touch all those plump little legs, pulling stockings on them, to take in her arms and dip those naked little bodies and hear joyful or frightened shrieks, to see the breathless faces of those splashing little cherubs with their wide, frightened, and merry eyes, was a great pleasure for her. When half the children were clothed again, Some dressed-up peasant women, who had gone gathering angelica and milkwort, approached the bathing house and stopped timidly. Matryona Filimonovna called to one of them to give her a towel and a shirt that had dropped into the water so that she could wring them out, and Darya Alexandrovna struck up a conversation with the women. The women laughed behind their hands at first, but then became bolder and began to talk, winning Darya Alexandrovna over at once by the sincere admiration they showed for her children. "See what a beauty, white as sugar," said one, admiring Tanechka and wagging her head. "But thin." "Yes, she was ill." "You see, he must have been bathing too," another said about the baby. "No, he's only 3 months old," Darya Alexandrovna replied proudly. "Just look at that." "And do you have children?" "I've had 4. There's 2 left, a boy and a girl. I weaned her before this past Lent." "And how old is she?" "Over a year." "Why did you nurse her so long?" "That's how we do it. 3 fasts." And the conversation came to what interested Darya Alexandrovna most. How was the birth? What illnesses have they had? Where is the husband? Does he visit often? Darya Alexandrovna did not want to part from the women. So interesting was it for her to talk with them, so completely identical were their interests. What pleased Darya Alexandrovna most was that she could see clearly that all these women particularly admired how many children she had, and how good they were. The women made Darya Alexandrovna laugh, and offended the governess, who was the cause of this, for her incomprehensible laughter. One of the young women who was watching the governess, who got dressed last of all, and as she put on her 3rd petticoat, could not help observing, "See, she wraps and can't get done wrapping," and they all burst into laughter. If you enjoy this format, please leave a like and subscribe and return tomorrow for the next chapter.